Greetings, blessed community of Travis Park. My name is Evan Jones. I currently serve as the Associate Minister at First United Methodist Church in downtown Dallas, but I grew up at Travis Park and served as a youth minister there for 7 years. Travis Park will always have a special place in my heart, and I'm so thankful that you invited me back to tell this story. When I was in my last semester at Perkins School of Theology, I took a course called United Methodist History. The final project in that course was to write a 3-page paper on any topic of your choosing. Given that it was my last semester, I was pretty ready to be out, and so I picked what I thought was going to be a very easy topic, which was this story that had been passed down from generation to generation at Travis Park. So I grabbed some history books on Methodism in Texas, and I noticed some funny things. The first was that the stories were almost identical. A few words had changed, but the dates were inconsistent. The other thing that I noticed was that the central character's name was never listed in full, almost like they didn't know it. So that's where my journey began, to figure out her name, to figure out if the story was true, and then to figure out whatever happened to her because she seems to have just kind of disappeared to history. The history books generally draw from just one source. W. Penson was a pastor at Travis Park Church and was present when Mary Volino was converted. He recounts this story in a solicitation book. This is the same story I remember hearing as a kid. A madam of a popular brothel in San Antonio heard a street preacher and was convicted. The next day, she attended a revival at Travis Park where she converted her life to Jesus Christ and converted her brothel into a rescue home for fallen women. Upon her return to the brothel, she tells the young women, "Girls, I'll give you shelter and God will give us bread." Thus was born the Methodist Mission Home. What a great little story. The woman converted and Travis Park's role in starting the Methodist Mission Home. But who was this woman? Where did she come from and where did she go? So our journey begins on September 14th, 1895. That's the day of the revival at Travis Park. At the northwest corner of San Saba and Monterey was one of the most successful and infamous whorehouses in San Antonio. The house was a sprawling 2-story mansion with over 32 rooms. The woman in charge of the home was named Mary Volino, known almost exclusively as Madame Volino. 6 years earlier, wedding records show that a woman named Mary Levine married Mike Volino. That same year, they had a son and they named him William. But Mary was operating in the red light district in San Antonio long before Mike ever arrived. As early as 1883, Mary was operating under an alias named Claude Duval, who was a popular and notorious madam in San Antonio. She had a large property just outside of the red light district in San Antonio. At the corner of 3rd and West Avenue, it was just a couple of blocks from the Alamo. This brothel was very successful, and she used the proceeds to buy a plot of land at the corner of San Saba and Monterey and began building her 32-room brothel. In 1881, court records show that Claude Duval was sued and her alias was listed, and she was known as Mary L. Burns. Mary Burns was married to Peter Burns. They operated saloons, hotels, and brothels in the red light district in San Antonio. They had a daughter named Gracia who died when she was 13, and the whereabouts of Peter Burns are unclear to this day. The location and date of Mary's birth are still unclear. She lists multiple places and multiple birthdays on different census records. We can speculate that she was born between 1848 and 1851. So let's go all the way back to 1895. Work on the home began quickly. Regular worship services, classes, and the cleaning of the home were a part of the everyday routine. Mary had incurred some debt, and so Travis Park paid off the debt and took over possession of the property. Mary was involved in the day-to-day operations as well as members of Travis Park Church. Mary became known as the matron of the home and was really responsible for soliciting donations to keep the work of the home going. In the early days, the home had between 20 and 30 women. These numbers grew quickly, and by 1898, there were 63 women in the home. The home became too crowded. Eventually moving out in 1935, the house that Mary built lasted for almost 50 years. They moved the mission into a hospital and eventually out on Whitby Road, where it's still in operation today. Formerly known as Methodist Mission Home, is now called Providence Place. The hat rack from the original brothel still greets visitors to Providence Place. But whatever happened to Mary? In 1904, it became clear that Mary was preparing to leave San Antonio. A rapid sale of land and goods meant that her time in San Antonio had come to an end. Sometime between November of 1904 and May of 1905, she and Mike settled in a small town of Providence, Oklahoma. Tragedy struck in 1906 as William became infected with tuberculosis. Seeking a dry climate, as so many did, the family traveled to El Paso to stay at the Hotel Dieu, a hospital that treated tuberculosis. After a 3-week stay, William died and is buried in the Evergreen Cemetery in El Paso in an unmarked grave. By 1910, Mike's brothers, Joe and Domingo, and their families had joined them in Providence, where they operated a hotel, saloon, and general goods store. Domingo and Sally Volino had 4 children. The youngest was named Mary Virginia Volino. She was born in January of 1920. My first trip to Ardmore, I found her. She was still living. She was 90, and I got the opportunity to interview her and get some insights about what happened to the family. Virginia has no personal memory of Mary, but has some resentment towards her, as there seems to be a money dispute between Sally and Mary after Domingo and Mike's death. Mike died December of 1920. He's buried in the Providence Cemetery, just outside of town, alongside his brothers and his mother Angie. After their death, Virginia remembers hearing her mother Sally say Mary, quote, took all the money from us kids, quote. Because of the financial dispute, upon Mary's death, there was no funeral or burial record. Virginia states that Mary is buried just to the south of Mike in the Providence Cemetery. At that location, there's a small, deteriorated headstone. We now know for the first time where the founder of the Methodist Mission Home is buried. We don't know her date of death, but assume it was in the early 1920s. The last known record of Mary alive was the 1920 census, where she was listed as 71 years old. This unlikely hero in Methodism in Texas provides us a legacy to lean on, to live into. Thank you for letting me tell this story. It's my hope and prayer that the people of Travis Park will continue Mary's legacy by serving the poor and loving God. Be well.